There are many amazing stories about the afterlife. Some regressions to past lives, premonitory dreams, visions of the deceased, near-death experiments are all disturbing testimonies that raises questions about the existence of other realities. This testimonial aims here to illustrate the subject of invisible worlds, not through the research for formal proof which, in my opinion, is of no interest, but rather through the subject of problem solving. Since my teenage, I had the exact same nightmare about once a year. A cold and dark entity would come and rest right next to me, and I would try to escape it by screaming. But during the last part of the sleep cycle, the body is paralyzed. So it was impossible for me to scream, which made the experience even more terrifying. I would wake up terrified, and I would have to wait several hours before being able to fall back asleep. The repetitive nature of this experience had made me very fatalistic, and I had been accepting this situation for a long time, without ever really looking for explanations. In 2019, I had this nightmare at the beginning of the year, in February to be exact. Surprisingly, 2 months later, when my wife and I had rented a cottage to visit the castles of the Loire Valley, on the very first night, I had this nightmare again. Moreover, the fact that this nightmare happened a second time in such a short time puzzles me for another reason. For the first time, a particular detail intrigues me. The dream took place in the bedroom of the cottage that I was occupying that night. In the dream, all the details of the room are present: the furniture, the decoration, my wife sleeping next to me. And thinking back to all the other previous nightmares, I begin to make the same observation. All the nightmares occurred in the room where I was sleeping. But this is not possible because my experience of the dream world has shown me that the brain always creates imaginary places that never resemble in detail the places we are familiar with. I then understand that it is not only a dream, it's also a vision. The abundance of details and the fact that the nightmare repeats itself so quickly leads me to consider that it's not the fact of my unconscious, but that there must be another explanation. This awareness decided me to get moving to find the real explanation. While discussing this experience with one of my best friends, he suggested me that I make an appointment with an elderly woman who was into the supernatural. Motivated by my desire to find answers, I decided to make the appointment without really knowing what her skills were. She was a 70-year-old woman of small stature who welcomed me into her small house in the countryside, and who told me her journey, as if to answer this question I had not yet asked her. I understood from the statement of her experiences that she is, among other things, a soul guide. She helps wandering souls to ascend to heaven. Indeed, her gift allows her to see the souls of the deceased who died in circumstances that were often difficult, not to say traumatic, and who remain here below because they are not really aware of being dead, or because they are still too attached to something or someone here below. Even though this subject is not one of my main interests, my open mind welcomes her anecdotes with great attention. After explaining the reason for my visit, she asked me to close my eyes. She recited a few prayers, and I felt her pass her hands around my head and chest. Then she told me after 2 or 3 minutes, she had the explanation. My attention was at its peak. A few centuries ago, in a dungeon of Mont Saint-Michel, you were the prisoner of a monk who locked you in an iron cage and tortured you to death. Since his own death, he has been desperately trying to contact you to obtain your forgiveness, because without your forgiveness, he thinks he can't go to heaven. She gave me a few seconds to integrate this astonishing information. Then she asked, "So, are you willing to give him your forgiveness?" Well, I don't see why I should refuse him forgiveness, even though I have no memory of this story. "Do you accept to give him forgiveness?" she insists. "Yes, I give him my forgiveness. So right now, he can go in peace." And so the session ends like that. I thanked her for her help while still being very doubtful about the explanation that I had just been given to me. On the way back, as I was thinking that we don't have this kind of experience every day, a memory came back to me. When I was about 15 years old, lying on my bed, just before falling asleep, I felt an icy wind pass over my body. I immediately woke up in a panic because I didn't understand what was happening. I immediately made the connection with our ghost monk. Later, I learned that Mont Saint-Michel had a prison since the 13th century. And in the 15th century, Louis XI expressly requested the installation of an iron cage where the Cardinal de la Ballieu was incarcerated, accused of treason. Called the Bastille of the Seas, or the Black Legend, the abbey had become a state prison during the Revolution. I also told myself that if all this was true, I should perhaps in the future look at my experiences in connection with the invisible world with a little less fear and more curiosity. The story could end there, and I could consider these explanations as simply fanciful. Yet, surprisingly, it has now been 7 years since I don't have these nightmares. All this is really astonishing.